adulthood is, kind of undefined. We could say anything past 18 to maybe late 30s, mid-30s. Some say 20 to 40 years of age, but give or take a few years. One of the things we probably didn't talk about last class was aging. What kind of causes us to age, right? Things start to decline at a certain period, mostly beyond this phase, but even within this phase. We say, hey, you get to your early 30s, mid-30s, right? Or a young guy like myself, you might get some gray hairs, right? We say your hair follicles start to die at the cellular level. What's what we call senescence, sort of this decline in depth of cells over a period of time. Theoretically, cells can divide or replicate about 40 to 60 times before they face apoptosis, which is death of the cell. So think about it, at the cellular level, right? We have the nucleus of the cells, and then we have what we talked about earlier in the semester, those chromosomes, right? Right here at the tip of these chromosomes are what we call telomeres. So if you want to envision it, right, we say, hey, chromosomes contain that packet of DNA information, that coding information on what to do within the body. At the tips, you can kind of imagine it like a shoestring, right? So you say, hey, this is the shoestring parts, but these are these little plastic caps at the end. And what happens is these little plastic caps at the end, they shorten each time the cell divides. And they kind of get frayed like a shoestring. The little plastic ends, they get frayed and kind of spread out. And essentially that causes the death of the cell, which causes us to eventually start to decline and die. And so it's thought that if we were biologically, scientifically to find a way to preserve these telomeres, human beings could live 200 years, 300 years. Right? You're like, hey, what's causing that to sort of fray out or sort of divide faster? Right? Theoretically, it's thought that the more caloric intake you have causes you to age quicker. So fundamentally, if you want to live the longest life possible, right, all things being considered equal, right, then you're talking about having the least caloric intake throughout your entire life. Not eating that much, eating very minimal, right? Not eating lots, so you have to keep metabolizing all these things over and over, making the cells replicate and divide and die off faster, right? So that's sort of the theoretical thought. But you're like, hey, it's not this simple, that's just the genetic part. The environmental part too is like, hey, I'm stressed out, right? Stress kills. Stress is a silent killer. Over time, it perpetually kind of degrades the cells, right? That also causes it. All sorts of other diseases, viruses, colds, all sorts of things that may be not included, right, in the genetic aspect. So it's kind of how aging takes place. You're at your optimum sort of physical capabilities between 20 and 40. So if you see athletes, you're like their best numbers, their best statistics are in this range. Usually I would say around 30, because now the brain, the mind has caught up to be sort of kind of highly efficient in even using your physical capabilities. So say you're 20 years old, you're like a new NBA basketball star, you have all the raw physical talent, but you'll probably be even better when you're 30 because now mentally you've kind of dissected the game, right? That prefrontal cortex is finished, right? So now you got high logical function meeting up with the physical talent that you have. Average age, so fertility and reproductive capacity, hey, females do not have the same sort of time frames that males have in terms of reproduction, right? Generally, if you get pregnant in your mid-30s, sometimes even early 30s, they consider it a geriatric pregnancy, right? You're like almost at the cusp of 2H. You're like, hey, this is risky. I don't know if the child may not survive. all sorts of issues. The mother may not survive the pregnancy, right? So generally, late teens to early 20s is optimum for fertility, right? Late teens to early 20s. But then you're like, hey, all right, late teens, early 20s, you still have economic issues, financial issues, right? Maybe your brain patterns and your thought processes aren't your best too. Right? So you're kind of like, hey, maybe 30 might be a great time to have kids. Late 20s to maybe up to late 30s, maybe optimum mentally and, still pretty good physically. Men, all things being considered equal, if you don't have any diseases or anything of that kind, men can make babies until they die. All right? Past the age of 40, you will get some decline in sperm count. Right, so that could kind of be typical, but it's thought of, hey, if you don't have any major diseases, any major issues, men can have babies in their 70s. They can keep continuing making. Common causes of death at this particular age, we were like, hey, things related to substance use, alcohol particularly, binge drinking happens to be a very big issue within this age, particularly even in college. Right? It says binge drinking is 5 drinks or more in a short period of time for men. Right? Women have 4 drinks or more for women, right? Due to kind of the body mass of females. Poor decision making with binge drinking. Hey, men may get into fights, car accidents, for long periods of time, cirrhosis of the liver failure, right? Females may put themselves at risk for sexual assault, sexual violence, not remembering what happened the night before, things of that nature, right? So binge drinking is something not to really participate in, right? Has very bad outcomes. Obesity, anything over body mass index of 29. Remember we say body mass is simply height versus weight, right? Nothing more. Things could be relative. You might have dense bones and things like that. Well, that's not the calculation. Simply height over weight, height divided by weight. Anything over 29 is considered obese, right? Some things that can influence that, genetic, environmental factors. Hey, once again, socioeconomic status. If you're poor, you may have a food desert. There may not be healthy food options in your neighborhood, in your community. So your behavior, you'd be inclined to likely buy fast food, fried food, snacks, things of that nature, right? Because it's just not, either you can't afford healthy food, because healthy food is kind of expensive sometimes, or you just don't have it within proximity of where you live. Health risks associated with obesity, obviously heart disease is one of the #1 killers in the United States and around the world. Cancers can spawn from obesity, different forms of cancers, and also the other health benefits, health risks. Exercise, recommended that, hey, at least throughout a week that you get maybe about 3 hours worth of exercise, right? That's usually the recommendation. That's not too bad, 3 hours a week. It'd be great if you get more, but anything less, once we say that senescence, right? We're starting to age more, which means we will naturally gain weight unless you're really active and working out. Your body will get bigger, right? Your body will you just see people just look around, all the professors who ever did, just get bigger over time, right? We could look 20 years ago at the pictures and be like, oh, wow, it look different, right? So in order to kind of keep that nice figure, you do need to really exercise a lot. Probably really watch the amount of salt and sugar that you intake. So say binge drinking, right? Particularly for college age students, right? Influence of college environment. Hey, people may be socially influenced to binge drink. There's parties, kegs, beer bongs, all things like that. Overall drinking declines during early adulthood. The thing is, remember we said, hey, you may have a predisposition for certain things. Your dad may have been an alcoholic, mom may have been an alcoholic. You're predisposed genetically for it, but the gene itself may not express itself unless something triggers it in the environment, right? Which is usually like, hey, you keep constantly getting exposed to drinking, and now you hit maybe the right drink, tequila, something like that, and like, that gene will express itself. It's like, I crave this, I need this, and now you have an addiction, right? So in some way, we may all have some sort of, we all have predispositions for certain things, right? It could be even schizophrenia. We may be highly addicted to certain things if we're exposed to it. The thing is to try to just be mindful of your own exposures. Marijuana, second highest used substance is pot, weed smoking, using all sorts of cannabis-related substances, things with THC in it. The thing with smoking marijuana or smoking anything, right? Normally we'll be like, hey, marijuana has great health benefits. It helps people with cancer, with pain, all sorts of things, right? Cannabis in it. But at the same time, if you're smoking it, it's like anything that you smoke is still smoke, right? So maybe if you're going to use some sort of cannabis, maybe edibles and other things like that might be the better option, right? The better option to go. But with anything, we say abuse is bad, right? So all things in moderation. But anything smoking, you may say, hey, it's not bad because it's it's still marijuana, but you don't want to ingest that into your lungs for years and years and years, right? Tobacco, the same thing, right? Tobacco has significantly detrimental health effects, particularly for maybe your age group. E-cigarettes are sort of the big thing, the vapors, right? We say quickly rise of lung cancer, issues with the liver, asthma, bronchitis, all sorts of things from that. Last class we talked about different post-hormonal reasoning, so maybe we won't need to go back over that. Pragmatic thought, right? Reasoning is fused with emotion. We talked about that. They're connected, but maybe some of us have a little bit less reasoning and more emotions. College students, right? College can be stressful, right? Either you can afford it or you cannot. Maybe you're the first generation college students. Anyone here? First generation? What are some of your stressors as first generation? Some issues like with the family, not understanding how college is. Are they all banking on you to succeed and you're going to be the one? Like, what is it? Anything?
They kind of set the example like, hey, you're gonna be the one who's gonna graduate. After I graduate, I'll be the one with the highest, like, I guess, knowledge or like education in the family.
And they think that, hey, that's gonna be we're gonna follow your success, basically, right? Hey, there's a lot of, that's a lot of stress to put on someone, right? And even in my family, I'm the youngest out of 11. Only people with actual college degrees are like 3 of us, and they're the youngest 3. Just kind of show you that the older generations, think about it. You can't say that they generally didn't like value college. They probably didn't need college, right? You could afford a house working at Burger King back then. You could afford an actual house. You could afford a car working at McDonald's full time, right? You probably could pay for college working at Taco Bell full time. Back then. You're like, now that's a joke, right? The inflation on college is well over like 1,000% in the last like 20 years, right? It's just insane, right? Law school costs $125,000 minimum, probably $200,000 now on average to go to law school. Medical school, $300,000, $400,000 for the student loan debt, right? So there's a big difference. But yeah, for my family, I have the highest education, right? So they probably just, I don't know, they just didn't value it, but then they also kind of look to the youngest kids they always come to me for some counsel or some advice, right? Either business or psychology related. stressful at times, right? So I don't want to be bothered. Cultural mismatch, right? The college should kind of match your culture, right? Maybe you may struggle. Maybe you may feel like you're discriminated in some way. Maybe you don't feel like your needs are being met because of a particular culture, right? Some students go to HBCUs, African American students, right? Historically black college and university. They feel like, hey, it more meets my needs. More comfortable. I don't feel like I'll be discriminated. So cultural mismatch can happen if you feel that things are what you think they should be. Non-traditional college students, when we said, hey, those who are 25 years or older, were coming back to college for the first time or returning to college. Veterans, right? Characteristics, they tend to be more serious about the work, and tend to get better grades. Why? They don't have as much time as you will. You have more time to kind of waste, right? Traditionally, we'll say. All right, a few more minutes and we'll get through. Students with developmental disabilities, huge issue, executive functioning. We kind of have Americans with Disabilities Acts, right? We kind of have to move around the developmental disability issues and provide the necessary needs for those students who have those issues, right? Try to help them the best way we can. Not attending college, right? You say, hey, back in the day you didn't need college. Now you most likely do. And it's highly unaffordable. So, your generation is really probably going through it because you're banking on it. But then you may not get the job you think you're going to get. You may not be satisfied with the job you do get. Trying to leave that profession and go to another one, probably unlikely to happen. There's a struggle with instant gratification. You may try to jump from job to job. Dissatisfied. Most people, I think 80% or more people are dissatisfied with their work, finding that they don't have meaning with the work. It's a job, it pays the bills, but it's not meaningful in any way to their life. But if you don't attend college, right, economic barriers, maybe about less than a third don't attend college. We say about 67% out of high school go directly into college. The remainder don't go. Economic barriers, low paying jobs. We used to have a lot of vocational training as opposed to just academic training. Like this is academic stuff. We were learning the theories and concepts. But vocational's like, hey, what about just go be a plumber? Go be an electrician. That's endless. There will always be work forever and ever. And it's very specialized, which means you're kind of more guaranteed to have a livable wage and guaranteed to have job security, right? For us as academics and scholars with our minds, sounds great, right? We'll all probably be smart, but I don't know if it correlates to income, right? A high income in that capacity. Right, some of the smartest people making least amount of income, right? Scientists and things of that nature. Occupational stages, we'll save that. Okay, I don't want to take up too much time because we gotta get the presentation. So we'll stop here and we'll pick up socio-emotional and a little bit of this on Friday. All right, group, are you ready? You gonna bring your laptop up here? We got Olson, Michaela, JJ, Rogelio, and Eli. Let me turn the light down.
Right. So today we're going to be talking about physical development in infancy and toddlerhood. So this would be like from birth all the way around age 3 to 4. My name is Eli.
don't have the strongest immune system when they are first born. That's why babies are like, when you first have your kid, you are told not to give them water. That's why they're not supposed to have formula. They're not supposed to have certain water because they're just not ready for it. Your kids will break out in hives. Most of the time, they'll get sent to the hospital just for being sick. Unsafe drinks such as juice, milk, also can hurt your kids. That's why you always have to check what you're giving your kids because there's a lot of things that can hurt kids up until the age of 3.
So I focus on the processes and the influence of experience on brain development and empathy and intelligence. So there are 4 processes that the brain develops, and that's neurogenesis, synaptogenesis, synaptic pruning, and myelination. Neurogenesis, the creation of neurons. Synaptogenesis, the creation of synapses. Synaptic pruning is reducing unused neural connections, and myelination is axons code with myelin to increase the speed of transmission. So information about neurogenesis, definition is that the first neurons form early in prenatal development in the embryo's neutral tube, which is called neurogenesis. We are born with 100 billion neurons, so it is said that it is more than we will ever need and more than we will ever have at any other time in our lives. When some of our neurons die, neurogenesis continues through life and new neurons are formed, but at a slower pace compared to prenatal development. As the brain develops, new neurons migrate along the network of glial cells. Right here, I got a picture of it, and some of them are all of the dendrocytes, microglial cells, astrocytes, and others. And glial cells are basically like a second type of brain cell that outnumbers neurons. And also during this process, neurons travel along glial cells to the location of the brain where they will function, often the outer layer of the brain, which is the cortex, and glial cells instruct neurons to form connections with other neurons. Alright, so for synaptogenesis, this is a process where dendrites grow and branch out that increases synapses with other neurons. And the dendrite is basically a branch extension of a neuron that receives signals from other neurons and it transmits those signals to the cell body. During this process, most activators of synaptogenesis during the first 5 weeks of life are the sensory cortex and subcortical parts of the brain, which are responsible for respiration and other essential survival processes. So, the bottom left has the picture of the visual cortex, and in the middle is the prefrontal cortex. And the visual cortex is develops very rapidly between 3 and 4 months, and it reaches peak density by 12 months of age. And the prefrontal starts in the sensory and motor cortex in infancy, and it continues through childhood until adolescence and early adulthood. So the last part of this chapter was focusing on experiences that help with brain development. So there are two types of brain development that babies can develop. It's the experience expecting brain development and experience dependent. Experience expecting it depends on experiencing certain basic events and stimuli at key points in time to develop normally. And experience dependent brain development refers to the growth that occurs in response to living experiences. And some examples of experiences that babies do are like eating, stacking blocks, crawling, or like playing with toy cars, moving objects, and this all helps to like enhance the development of the child. And the last thing is how to sleep help with brain development. So when babies are usually born, they need like a lot of sleep in order to be fully developed. So a typical neonate sleeps about 16 to 18 hours, and when an infant is about 6 months old, this is about 12 hours. And they also sleep during a process called REM, which is rapid eye movement, and it increases about 20% when they're in adulthood. And it's also believed that it provides infants with stimulation, brain development, and cognitive growth.
Alright, so I'm gonna be talking about infancy development and sensory abilities. So like we're gonna be talking about at birth and then go all the way down to the year. So at birth, infants are born with limited vision, seeing only high contrast patterns with focus at a distance about 8 to 12 inches. And then at 2 to 3 months, it improves focus ability to track moving objects, and begin recognizing familiar faces, so like your parents, brothers, sisters, whatever that may be. By 6 months, depth perception starts developing, color vision approaches adult-like levels, and then by 1 year, vision continues to refine and becomes similar to an adult vision. And then hearing, in a utero, fetuses can hear sounds, especially the mother's voices and external noises, at around like 25 weeks gestation. At birth, hearing is functional but not fully developed. Infants can distinguish between different pitches, tones, and volumes. And then at 1 to 3 months, can turn towards sounds and recognize familiar voices, especially the mothers. And then by 6 months, able to distinguish between different speech sounds and start using these auditory cues for language development. And then touch at birth, infants experience the world mainly through touch, with heightened sensitivity, especially around the face, hands, and feet. So that's why you always see babies touching their faces. At 1 to 3 months, begin exploring by reaching, gasping, and sucking. Positive touches fosters bonding and emotional regulation. So they always be touching toys, always, breastfeeding. They always do that. By 6 months, fine motor skills improve for complex interactions with objects. And then taste and smell. Taste, newborns distinguish basic taste, sweet, salty, sour, and bitter, and prefer sweet flavor, so like breast milk. By 3 to 4 months, preferences are influenced by exposure to different foods. And then smell, infants can recognize their mother's scent and are sensitive to pleasure and unpleasant odors, influencing feeding and emotional responses. So sensory overload and regulation, overstimulation. Infants are sensitive to sensory overload, which can occur if they're exposed to too much stimuli, like bright lights, loud noises. Parents or caregivers should be mindful of the infant's need for quiet time and breaks. Self-regulation, over time, infants develop the ability to regulate their sensory experiences. So like looking away from bright lights or sounds they find overwhelming. So like in conclusion, the developing sensory system, sensory abilities are essential for infants' development and are interconnected with their emotional and cognitive growth. From vision and hearing to touch, taste, and smell, each sensory system matures over time, shaping the infant's experience from the world. Caregivers play a crucial role in providing appropriate sensory stimulation to support a healthy development for infants.
Hey, all right, you guys sit down. So what I'm hearing is that the human being is just an organism, like any other organism, right? And you're like, hey, we are essentially programmed that if we change our environment, whatever that environment may be, things inside us will change, whether we like it or not. We don't have the mental control over the processes that make us change internally, right? These neurons, these connections, whether the ones we get rid of, the ones we keep, we're just simply built for survival, just like any other organism. So something to consider. Change the environment, the human being will evolve and change with that environment as well too. So environment is probably the most important factor in our lives. If you go to a great school, you'll be better than a non-great school. You live in a great neighborhood, you will be probably more mentally healthier than someone who doesn't live in a great neighborhood. Right? If you get away from harsh climate, you might enjoy yourself a little bit more. Right? So there's even detriments to living in the city of Chicago, just because of the climate alone. Right? Some people might be more happy living in places like San Diego, which has the best weather the entire United States. Okay, that's it. We'll, who, our next group, who's our next group? Friday. Group. Who's our last group? Yeah, they're not here. So, yeah, we have a group on Friday to present it, so we can knock that out before Thanksgiving break. And we'll finish up social emotional. All right, everyone, have a good day. I'll see you on Friday.